been doing a lot of programming, and it's a silly season right now with people having tryouts and team selections and everything like that. So I'm trying to convince, I don't know, maybe 6 organizations now to eliminate the tryouts and to just do placements. I did a little survey internally with the organizations I work with, and I think on average it was about 5% that of kids that came for quote unquote tryouts were out from outside the organization.
Yeah.
Like, that weren't even, that they maybe somebody, they knew about the kid, but it wasn't somebody like, it's not like there's 40 kids trying out for new spots. It's like 2 kids at every level. And so I'm trying to get them to understand that if you want to retain more families and train more kids and just have a better experience, that selecting the kids based off of their body of work is going to be better for the families and the kids in the long run. Maybe going back to the earlier conversation about that resiliency, I can see the argument a little bit that kids should have to go through the tryouts, maybe toughen them up a little bit, and I don't know, maybe give them a sense of having to fight for something. But I think you can accomplish that same thing at the youth level through evaluations and feedback, rather than saying, okay, you had this make-believe 3-day tryout, we're cutting you, and we're not telling you why you're getting cut or how you're getting better or how you fit on the team. I mean, I think you could manufacture a lot of that by saying, listen, this is the reason why we're not putting you on the team. It's because of these qualities. And we would love for you to see you reach these things in order for us to put you on a different team or with a different group. I don't know. So yeah, and long-winded, it's been busy, but it's a fun busy.
Peter.
Yeah, Mike, that's super interesting. Let me ask you this. How does this part fit into that plan? The kid that shows up day 2 or 3 of the tryouts because they didn't make the A team on the other program, so they decide to show up for the tryout. How was that kid accommodated?
Yeah, so we've been trying to work through like an evaluation process where it's not so much the 3 days that you see a kid. It's more of there's an application process, and you say, listen, if you want to come to our organization, just understand the number one goal is the organization to retain their kids. So by saying that, we say we want, if you come here and we select you, we're so good at selecting, and we're so good at understanding the human condition, right? We want to select you. We want to keep you. We want to develop you. We want to be the ones, we're not going to cut you. We're going to make sure that you have a place in our organization, and this is where we feel you fit in. If you're coming from an outside organization, and I think this is where you have to weigh, are you getting better by bringing in maybe a kid that's better than the kids you have, or are you diminishing your program by having a kid come and bump a kid that's been in your program? So what we try to do is it's more of what we're trying, and actually locally, it's one of them is Paul in youth hockey, trying to get them to be in more of an application process and a proactive process that says, we've already selected our teams based off of the kids that have come into the program. We're looking to fill different roster spots based off of the kid coming in, and it's based off a body of work and not on some arbitrary 2-day, evaluation where the kid goes through a bunch of cones and does some skating drills. Because I just don't think that's a great way for us to pick our teams. And and it's funny because that's how we pick the teams at the highest levels of USA hockey in New York State, right? Is that you give the kids, you look at them for 3 hours and then try to evaluate them and say, oh, this is the kids that should be on the team. And I just don't think that's a great, I just don't think that's a great system. So the places I can control, the youth level piece, trying to get them to be more proactive in pre-selecting the kids. And their tryout is actually the 25 weeks that they're with us. That's your tryout.
So do you have any direct comment with that? Is that on like their president of the organization, their hockey director? Because you're probably going to have some kid that's on a B team that the parent says, no, my kid should be on an A team. I don't agree with your assessment, right?
Right.
That who is the bearer of that news? Like who brings that?
So we're trying to get a lead evaluator and then a director at every level. So 8U, 10U, 12U has a director at that level, and that person oversees whatever major minor, AB, major minor and AB, whatever it might be. That person and to your point, that's what I'm trying to convince them, that the same parent that's going to bitch about you not selecting them after 3 days is still the same parent that's going to complain if you place them. But if you place them, at least you're giving them the reason for the placement, not you weren't good enough, so you made the B team. It's this is where your deficiencies were, in our opinion, because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what your opinion is because we're the ones selecting the team. We're the ones that have to work with your kids. We're the ones that have to put the lineup together. So I'm just trying to show the organizations to take the power away from the parent and put it back into the team selection process and run it almost like you would if you were recruiting for a college program where, obviously you would love to have a freshman that was the best player on your ice. But the whole idea is that when you come here as a freshman, I'm going to develop you through the 4 years you're with me so that when you're a senior, you're going to be one of our better players. And I think that's in the youth hockey world's lost that. The youth hockey world is a 6-month cycle. It's 6 months. You didn't get better. You did get better. I'm cutting you 3. I'm keeping you 3. And the cycle is around here, especially is just so destructive to the players and frankly to the organizations. Like my job is to help organizations make money. And the best way to make money is retain kids. And the best way to retain kids is to communicate with them and give them take the power away from the parent and show them that you are giving them what you think is the proper evaluation, feedback, and direction so that you can best guide their kid in the program.
So is that something that if you're a parent and you're coming to that organization, is that a tool then for that organization to use, saying, listen, we don't cut the kids. We placed your son or daughter where we feel they should be. And we'll give you concrete evidence, reasons of why we feel that way. And then you do with that information really as you will, right? As a parent, you have your right to make your own decision, but understand that it's a whole year process to get to that point. And that's what we do.
Well, I'm trying to show them that it's actually a 6-year process, that it's a funnel. We bring you into the funnel from learn to play through 8U through 15U, and then we graduate you off to your prep school, high school, junior A program, whatever it might be. But we feel that when we select you, when you join our program, our obligation is to keep you in our program and develop you in our program, not to cut you. And if you leave, you leave. I mean, and if you don't like your placement, you don't like your placement. It's the same process in school, right? If you want your kids to be in all honors classes and they're not really ready for honors classes, you take a test and somebody evaluates whether they can handle it or not, right? Now, there are some kids that are very, very smart and maybe can handle an honors class because of a grade they got and because of a test they took. But then the guidance counselor, in this case, our hockey director or our program director, their job is to say, well, yes, you could be an honors bio, but is being an honors bio going to drag you down in math, science, English, and all the other subjects? So we're gonna make sure that you can't be in all honors classes because you can't handle all honors classes. So we're gonna help you navigate that academic piece. And my attempt is to get the youth hockey programs I work with to see it that way, that maybe you're not getting put on the top team because your development in this area is gonna be stunted, or you're not going to find the full potential of the kid. And by the way, this coach wants you. Like, it's one of those things. Like, do you want to be on a team? Do you want to force yourself on a team with an organization, a coach that doesn't want you, or do you want to place your kid on a team with a coach that really values you and wants you? And that's that. But again, this is the age-old problem that we're trying to solve right now.
Yeah, how is that being received by the organizations?
Terribly, awful.
right? Because you've got board members, right? Right, you got board members,
Because all the board members are parents, and their kids
right,
are always the A kids.
right.
So what happens is like, oh well, well that affects my kid now. I'm like, well, I understand that, but we're trying to eliminate that piece.
Right, and then you go to a bigger picture, right, of, you know what? Maybe we have to talk about our board selection, because I have been involved with programs in the past where a board member's kid has been placed on a B team because that's where they fit. And the response by the board member was, I've been doing this for 3 years, so my kid could be on an A team. I quit.
Where's my payoff? Like, this is my turn.
Right, right. So that's why I ask how it's being received. So it's unfortunately, I mean, the idea is super interesting, but it's unfortunate but people are looking at it that way. I mean, part of it is like, no, I'm the board, my kid, a player. I don't want to risk a situation where my kid's not going to be there. My kid's best friend's not going to be there, whatever that may be. Yeah.
Sorry, Wally.
Well, I'm listening to you guys talk, and I'm saying this is the perpetual issue, and I know how to solve it, but it's the leadership group, which is parents, that changes every 3 years, who begin with the right reason initially.
Yeah.
But over time, the human condition takes over. But here's the method, and I think both of you should write these things down, because at a U9 level, whole ice hockey, Carrie Bracco, who's been on before, in the Springbank community, which has 11 U9 teams. It just happened his boy was entering that age level, and another friend he played with, and I coached both of these guys, their kids were in U9, and they took over that age group, 11 teams. They took over the evaluation process and the development process. So they brought in more knowledgeable hockey people on evaluation, but they evaluated 3 things that you should write down: skill, hockey sense, and intangibles. Compete. Now, when you have your tryout, you mix everybody up. But they have 3 stations that they're going to go to. And the first station, the first day, is sort of a skill station. And you place them and move them while they're doing the skill station. They're mixed up to begin with. And you move the ones that are obviously the most skilled, stand out to the far end. So you might use 2 stations and move the very best to that other one, so that all the parents can see who the most skilled are. And then you play some type of game. And you're looking at hockey sense. You're looking at decision making. It might be a game of 2 versus 2 possession. Who can keep it the longest? Who's completing passes? Who's getting open? And even though it's U9, they still play the game, and you can see who thinks and has skill that you might have let slip through the cracks. And you move them down to the most advanced station. And then you do compete. 1 versus 1 races, battling, working hard, out competing, not quitting, effort. They might not have the skill, but boy, do they try. and they might end up going to the middle group. And eventually you create 3 skill groups, 3 groups on those 3 traits that you actually can score from 1 to 5. When you add them up, you can pick your teams quite easily, but you've considered 3 qualities. So when they did this, they placed kids accordingly, 11 teams, and they practiced with those 3 stations, a skill station, compete station, when they picked the teams, and a game station. And the kids rotated based on with their group. Even though you picked the number 1 team, there was still 3 groups within it. And they rotated through their stations with each group. So they did a skill station, a compete, and a game station. At the end of the year, well, before the season started, those 2 guys said, we need 2 number 1 teams. Of course, the board said, no, you can't water them down. We only want 1. Of course, they want to win the championship. So they kept 2 teams, and SO Minor Hockey Week here is sort of that time of year to find out whose programs are working the best in terms of outcomes. And actually, many of them are still learning to play hockey, so it's a crapshoot at best. But of the 11 teams, 9 of them won their division championship. And the top 2 teams they had in U9-1 played in the final. They got results. But the 2 guys never got their leadership positions back with the board the next year. But the selection process and placing them properly and even grouping them and developing them within their team, it's a work in progress, but at least it's something to consider when in your evaluations. The parents are going to change over and over again. The leadership group's going to change. So educating them on the process that's where we fail. Yeah. Because they're not going away. We're the ones that are stuck in the middle with trying to manage it. But I don't know if anybody has anything to add to that process, Jordan, but you've been there as long as I have, and people being happy with what level their kids end up at. What's your thoughts on it, Jordan?
Well, I see Peter has his hand raised. I can respond after. What do you,
Peter?
Sure. My question was, so those gentlemen weren't asked back, so I'm guessing that's not the process anymore. Because honestly, if that was here, and Mike, you can please agree or disagree, but that was here in the States, that president or hockey director would have about a dozen phone calls that night. I don't understand why my son or daughter was in the middle group. Last year they were on the 18. Now
it wouldn't be that night. It would be the dad. It would be the dad in the penalty box opening the door saying, "No. He's in that group. He's in that group. He's not with this group." I just saw it and learned to play. I mean, I'm working with 5-year-olds, and I had a father freak. I thought the dad was joking with me. He's like, "Hey, Mike, my daughter's in that group." Oh yeah, I go, okay, I'll get her. I'll make sure I send her down there. And I literally thought he was joking. And all of a sudden he's bellowing across the ice like my daughter is in the wrong group. I'm like, she's 5 and she can't stand up. I said, but Wally, Jordan, I'll let you jump in real quick. But Wally, I agree. So one of the things I'm trying to eliminate is we don't have a lot of Broncos here, and we don't have a lot of so going back to I'm running or I'm helping with organizations that have basically parent run and don't have that, and the people that are doing these selections don't have the tools to identify a player's other than the eye test. Like, okay, this kid's better than this kid. Very, very clear. It's
Yeah.
all those middle kids that are missing. And what I'm trying to get them to understand is, from a business perspective, is that the longer we can keep the communication going with the parents, that we're educating them and about where we feel the player is, then at the end of the year, when I take that player and place them onto the team that we've selected them for, I have a much better chance of selling the kid's placement over a 3-day window of moving kids back and forth and up and down. And because like you're dealing with like 9 and 10 and 11-year-olds, and down here, I mean, we literally have kids jumping on the ice on a Wednesday night for tryouts that are still in their lacrosse gear. Like, they come in from lacrosse after 2 hours of practice, jumping on the ice, and then asking to compete in a tryout, which isn't really even a tryout. Because if you were working with the programs I'm working with, these kids are all selected already. There's very few outliers. There's very few kids that are getting, like, somebody's like, oh my God, where'd this kid come from? Like, was he like working out on some barn on the farm and nobody saw him? You know, there's no young bloods down here. It's everyone knows who the kids are. And what my job is to say, well, how can we have a better experience for the parent and the kid? But I do agree that there has to, whatever the process is, we got to find a way to make it a process that doesn't roll over every time there's a new parent on the board. Sorry, Jordan.
No, I would echo what you're saying there, Mike, especially the last part, that it is when you have minor sports, it doesn't matter which sport it is, it's similar in that the who gets themselves involved in a board are typically people who have some sort of investment, and it's one of those things that, yes, they may have started for the right reasons, and but they're very few. Like, it's one of those things that you think about. They can't turn off their parent hat, or take off their parent hat, or turn off that they are a parent, because that's the way it is. And so they become invested. Coaches become invested in their kids too. Like, I look at the players that I've worked with over the years. Whether I'm coaching them or not, I want them to go on to post-secondary. So do I get invested? Do I contact coaches or have other people that I know that are close to coaches contact them? Absolutely. And that piece. So, but it's the revolving door piece is a tough one. We've seen both. Peter, you were talking about when a player gets placed down a level. Well, you sometimes see where a player who is that of a board member's child sometimes will get placed down on purpose by someone, and because they may have been overlooked by that person, they feel, in a coaching role at some point. And I've seen that, and I'm like, I don't understand it, why you would ever make a child pay for a bad choice of, or what you perceive as a bad choice of an adult. And I've had this is going a different direction, but Wally and I were talking about this the other day. I had a situation where what I would have seen as tampering or meddling by an adult with a player that was in an existing program to get them to another program. And we couldn't blame the 16 or 17-year-old child, but we sure could say that the adults that were involved probably, if they could have been held accountable in some way, should have been, and that piece. And it's the purity of sport is not the purity of sport when everyone is invested. And one last thing I'll add, Mike, is I've found that dollars also speak. If a parent spends more dollars, whether it's a better experience or not, they'll default to putting their kid where it's going to cost them more, it seems like. We had a hockey program at the high school where I had a former national team player running it, and it was just a cost recovery because the teacher's cost was already paid for in the students' fees or student allotment that we got from the province. So the cost recovery was on the transportation to the rink and the cost of the ice. So kids were getting 50 to 60 ice times in a year for the big expensive cost of $275. And we had parents that they would have a dry land thing on the go. And they would say, well, my kid has to miss hockey today because they got dry land later. And all you'd find out was, well, they're paying the dry land guy $1,500. And so they figure, well, we'll forego one for the other. So it's not one world. And I don't know that any of us will ever correct this. What I see as a stopgap or a help is people like Peter or Wally or well, Tom's still coaching, but get people that have been involved in the game to get on those boards, and or the ones that no longer have children in the association to get on those boards and put their volunteer time in after their children are done and do it for the right reasons.
Michael?
Yeah, there's no doubt. I mean, I think that's where I'm trying to go, Jordan, is like getting, and that's really where my role is, coming in sometimes as being just an advisory member of these organizations that I don't have any kids in, and just saying, listen, I'm blind to who's on. I don't want to know who's on the board. I don't want to know whose kid has been here for 10 years. I don't want to know whose kid, all I want to know is this a good kid? Are they okay in the locker room? And look, oh wow, they can play hockey. And and then to try to help them place those kids. But at the same time, like I know for me, like I've looked at, and Pete knows the area here too, is like I've looked at even the detriment to my own kid because I'm involved, is that I don't put him in, like I watch some players that are in these selection camps and all these programs, right? That I think objectively somebody would look at and say, well, the Mike's guy, his kid's a better player. But I just would never think of putting my kid in there in that situation because he's not going to be the top 8 players, right? So it's almost like, well, I definitely get, on the opposite way. I'm not pushing for my kid to get on the best team. Often I'm always like, oh, I don't know. I know all the kids. He's not one of the better kids in this group. And then instead of pushing, maybe I should push more, if I was outside of the realm. But I think overall, I look at this as, for me, it's a project of, these aren't the huge organizations that are getting 40 kids trying out for them. It's local organizations that have 98% of the kids are from the town. They've all grown up in the program. There's no need to put them through another money grab tryout. But I'd rather reinvest that money in development and tell the parents, you don't need to try out. It's still, because I understand we want to charge whatever we charge. I just think you can use that ice time better, and you can use the opportunity you have with those kids better. And to Pete's point, if there's a kid that comes out from another organization, it's not that difficult to figure out where that kid might fit in the pecking order. Now, if it's 40 kids, it's different. Like I joke around. There's 2 organizations down here, one that I would consider like a developer and one that's a compiler. And 2 years ago, 9 kids from this one team went and tried out for the big club, the AAA club. And all 9 kids made it. So I'm like, well, why don't you just stay in the organization you're in? You're the whole team. you just went from a town program to paying $5,000 a year each, but 9 of you made the team that only has 12 kids on it. Why are you going to why would you go to the other team? And but that happens down here. And Pete, you've seen it, right? All the time. A whole exodus of kids will leave, go to another team, make the team, quote unquote. But they're like, well, just stay in the organization that actually developed you. But I think it's a lot of it's the organization's fault that they left, because maybe they didn't communicate with them more and give that and listen to that level more and say, wow, we've got to make sure we're adjusting our philosophy and what we're doing to the level of the kid that we now have because of how successful we have been at developing. So you can't just, if you're doing a great job and you're developing your talent level, you can't just maintain a status of, tier 3 hockey to the parent that now has a kid that's perceived to be better than that. So you got to grow with it.
Yeah, I think too, Mike, I think a lot of, and Wally always talks about this, is the importance of communication to a board communicating to coaches being comfortable communicating with parents being willing to talk, because it's such a bizarre thing to me. I mean, I've seen, and you've probably seen the same thing, and probably the other guys too, someone who's incredibly accomplished, like a former National Hockey League player who's trying to give back to an organization, being told by a parent who never played the game before that they don't know what they're talking about.
Yes.
That's a tough one, but maybe some of that starts from communication from the top down, of being willing to communicate, have these discussions, understand, and just having an understanding of how the whole process works. Because I think it gets very compartmentalized, that there's coaches who just won't talk to a parent, bottom line, won't communicate with them, won't have a good communication with a player as to why they're doing what they're doing. Parents don't talk to the coach. I think if we somehow it could become more open, because at the end of the day, the process is supposed to be developing them athletically, mentally, socially, the whole ball. And you're not doing that when you begin to compartmentalize who can talk, who can't talk, how do we communicate if we're not communicating. So I think that's a bigger issue.
I got a question in Canada, and I don't think Jordan and Tom have experienced this because they've coached the AA, triple A levels most of their lifetimes. But in what we call community hockey, when they don't make AA or AAA, they have in communities here, and I'll just take a U15 age level. There might be 12 U15 teams in boys hockey. I don't know how many U15 teams there are in girls in terms of how are they tiered, or are they just playing in one league in girls? So I don't think but in boys hockey, they have tier 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, depending on the number of teams, and they might have 10 tiers. But here, and this is really interesting with the numbers, Michael, they pick them, they play them, and then they place the teams at a different level. So I worked with one game with Dean Holden, asked me to run a practice he was away from, and he said to me, he said, we're in the wrong division, Wally. We're not winning. We're not getting clobbered, but we should be in the division below us. And when it came placement time, they were put in the division below them. And of course, they started to win. And they didn't win before, but they were competitive. But they started to win. And everybody was happy. They didn't want to go down. There was that sort of ego thing, that human condition of placement and being rated a 4 now versus a 3. But the kids are a lot happier. The parents have accepted it, and they're a lot happier. So this idea, when your numbers get big, if that ever happens out there, placement of a team, I don't know that your numbers are large enough, Mike.
Well, the Connecticut Hockey Conference, so where we are in Connecticut, they do a reseeding. So what happens is you place your teams, you're getting, and then you'll get seeded after like the first month or two. They'll reseed those teams so that you can, so by the end of the year, you're playing in either, Division 1 or Division 5 or 6, depending on, where you're at. So you could actually win a state championship at Division 5 against the teams that are your ability. Like, so all the games in theory should be 1 or 2 goal games either way, right? And I think I think the system that the CHC has done is far better than, like, there's another program right across the border, like the Long Island League, where you could literally you could play games every weekend and lose by 9 or 10 goals, and you can't get out of the division. Like, you can't get out of that. It's the programs get fined if you don't show up, if you don't play. So it's just detrimental to the development of the kids. But I like the reseeding idea and the ability to say, listen, this is who you are at this moment in time. Let's play against teams that are at your level, developmentally, and it's just a better experience for everyone.
How did that organization that reseeds do it? How were they able to accomplish that sensible process?
So they have some algorithm that they've set up. Pete might know it better because he's in the state, but they run they you initially put yourself in the level where you think you're at, right? And obviously there's teams that say, well, we're going to go in the lower level because we want to win the state, so we're gonna purposely go down a level. But then when you're clobbering teams, it just reseeds you. It makes you move up. It's going to push you out and push those players down, teams down, based off of like competition. So if team 1 played team 4 and beat them, and then team 2 played team 4 and they beat them, and team 3 played team 4 and they crushed them, it's always reseeding you. And then by I guess probably mid-December, Pete, right? You start to see the reseeding process happen, and then at the end of the year, like your last month, you're playing teams that they'll tell you, it's almost like the Corsi ratings, right? They'll tell you like what the expected score should be. The expected score should be a 2-goal game, a 1-goal game, a 3-goal game, and it allows you to even be smart about how you're going to schedule outside teams.
Yeah, and it's not. It's a good system for sure, but like anything else, it's not a perfect system.
Yeah, right. There's ways to get around. There's ways to manipulate it, and But again, for the most part, every kid in the state, every team in the state is getting to play some type of meaningful hockey at the end of the year.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think that, and that's the benefit of it. Unfortunately, you have the whole thing with the adults being involved, where those rankings Mike's talking about come out in, let's say I think it is in December at some point, and you find yourself at the top, we'll say, of Division 4. Unfortunately, it's not unusual to find another Division 4 team that you're supposed to play on Saturday get a phone call, we can't play, because they frantically tried to find a Division 3 team that they can play and beat in an effort to get bumped up. So it's a really good system, but it's like anything else. Once the adults get in the way, it can mess it up. But the intent of it is fantastic, because like Mike said, most of the time you're where you belong, and every kid does get an opportunity to compete at the level where they actually fit. So if you can, they can, yeah.
Becomes the Bill Parcells credo, right? That you are who your record says you are. So if you say, well, now we're a tier 1 team, well, you're 0-18 against tier 1 competition. So you're not a tier 1 team. You might be playing in tier 1 hockey, but you're not a tier 1 team. So I think it's just a matter, you are what your record says you are. And I think the way they reseed and place and actually, because of that process, Wally, I think teams are more apt to try to place themselves in the right place to begin with, because it's a nightmare to reschedule all these. If you go out there and you say, oh, we're going to play way under our competition or way over our competition, and you don't do your research as to where you should start the process of scheduling games, it just becomes much harder for the scheduler, right? Because now you're literally starting a whole schedule from scratch in, mid-November. So it is in the best interest of the schedulers to think about proactively where they fit in, but it also helps that the algorithm helps you navigate that as the season progresses.
Now, when you say algorithm, and I'm assuming that the scale of assigning parents to just give a number for skill only, another group of parents to try to, what is hockey sense? What's the descriptor? What are they looking for? And a third group, compete, the character, the battle, the work ethic, make those evaluations as objectively as they can from what they see. It's the eye test. But for 3 separate qualities of character, intelligence of play. So the character effort is the most important piece, because those kids that work hard and try hard are going to get better. And they may be the ones that haven't had extra, started later. They may be more athletic, but haven't had a chance to develop. So when you do this placement, the algorithm of placement makes the idea of your tiering work better. Now, the ability of coaches to take their team and 3 skill stations, that's another thing. But we've created a U9 and U11 curriculum package. We had 40 practice plans. We cut it down to 10 and told them to repeat each practice 3 times. To do the same practice. The first time is you learn how to do it. Second time you learn how to teach within your station with your age, with your group of eagles, hawks, falcons, or eagles, hawks, pigeons. Depends what they are. But it develops good coaches working with kids, and we've mixed 3 teams on the ice in 3 skill groups that were the same tier and ran practice that way. So the coaches are mixed up from each team working with kids at the same skill level. And ideally, the knowledgeable head coach might be running the skill station to teach. Or if you have enough, he might be the one floating to coach the coaches. It's sort of an ideal world, ideal achievement, but I think the idea of 3 traits and trying to numerically give them a number, it's going to develop better parenting in terms of awareness of it. It's not just their skill. They're going to have to apply it, and they're going to have to work hard to get it. And you're teaching life skills, which show up in the intangible 1 versus 1 compete station. So all good stuff. I don't know